Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Electricity Association's Conversation Series. My name is Dave McKendry. I'm Senior Fellow with the Canadian Electricity Association. The CEA has been working with our corporate partners to develop the Conversation Series, which focuses on solutions to current and future challenges within our industry. Today, Contact Point 360 will be presenting using artificial intelligence and speech analytics to monitor, track, and improve customer experience to ensure 100% compliance. Contact Point 360 subject matter experts will discuss how AI-based speech analytics and data mining tools are being used to help companies access and analyze up to 100% of agent customer interactions. Traditional quality assurance models are time-consuming, expensive, and on average only assess somewhere between 6 to 10 calls per agent per month. This has been a standard in the contact center world for decades. Now companies can have instant visibility and analysis of 100% of customer interactions. These speech analytics and data mining tools are true game changers in terms of customer experience and compliance. This presentation will include case studies and an overview of the technology. Our presenters today from Contact Point 360 are Elizabeth Sedlacek, Vice President, Client Relations and Partnerships, and Mark Rodrigue, who's Vice President, Operations and Global Growth. Before we get started, please feel free to type in any questions into the question area on your webinar screen, and we'll ask those questions at the end of the webinar. And we'll send out a copy of this presentation after the webinar along with the post-webinar survey. We certainly appreciate your feedback. We're also interested in any topics that you may have that you would like to see as a part of this conversation series. Elizabeth and Mark, we'll now turn the webinar over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us, Dave, and for your introduction. Mark and I, first of all, would like to welcome each of you joining us here today and really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with us on Speech Analytics AI. Our goal is for you to learn about how you can apply speech analytics AI in your contact centers. We'll specifically be sharing new techniques to enhance quality assurance programs and improve agent performance. So now on to the agenda here. We've got quite the lineup here for you today. We'll first provide an overview of Contact Point 360, and then we'll move into discussions around speech analytics AI, and here's what you'll learn. We'll start off with an introduction to speech analytics AI. What does it mean? Next, we'll share with you how it works in the contact center space and how it compares to a traditional quality assurance model. We'll then move into hearing from two organizations that are using the technology, along with some highlights of what they've learned. For best practices, we spoke to top contact center leaders to get their perspective on best practices to consider. And we'll also share some insights on what to consider when choosing a platform. Then we'll move on to the question and answer period. So let's start with a little bit about who we are, our journey here at Contact Point 360. We started out in 2007 with one contact center location and just under 100 team members. Fast forward to today, we've grown into 1,400 team members in 4 countries and 8 global sites. Our services are divided into the traditional BPO service. We run the gamut from inbound to outbound to tech support, along with our consulting solutions. We work every day with dedicated solution engineers, and their focus is on technology to enhance our customer and our employee experience. 60% of our clients are in the energy and utilities sector across North America. And for the last 2 years, I'm really proud to say that we have been certified and credited as a great place to work here in Canada. I'm now going to hand off to Mark to introduce Speech Analytics AI and how it works in the contact center space. Over to you, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Liz. Hey, absolute pleasure to be able to have this discussion with all of you. We're encouraging questions at the end. Yeah, and again, the utility space is one that's near and dear to our heart. It's a space that we enjoy and a space that I think we've gotten pretty good at. But one of the things we recognized is, with our client base, we don't want to be a head and hands and just answering the call. So, part of our adopting this type of technology was to really help them improve their business, understand deeper learnings about their business overall. So let me start with this. It's, what is speech analytics in general? Well, quite simply put, in the context of the call center world, it's the process of analyzing recorded calls, gathering information, and, working with teams of people to really try to improve current customer communications and future interactions, right? And to be quite frank, it's a little bit of an archaic model. I mean, it works. It's been around for a long time, decades and decades. However, the challenge is, as Dave mentioned at the beginning, we might be monitoring, all of us together, somewhere around average of between 6 and 10 calls per month per agent. So it's not a really huge sample size to really gain deep insights into a business. But things are starting to change now. We have artificial intelligence that's being injected into all parts of our lives, right? As a matter of fact, it's at a point where AI speech analytics is going to grow from a $1 billion business, and that's in US dollars in 2020, to about $5 billion over the next 4 to 5 years. So that's pretty significant growth. So there's something to this. And again, our goal today, we're not going to run a demo on any type of platform. We're vendor agnostic, but we just wanted to really give you a sense of what we learned and why we think it's important for our industry. So first of all, again, what is AI speech analytics? Now, so that was, the traditional model where we would be, running somewhere around 1 to 2% of all calls we receive. Basically, AI speech analytics involves what's called natural language processing. And basically, excuse me here. Sorry, I got muddled up here. And speech recognition. So natural language processing is quite simply something that all of you use in your day-to-day lives. So if you ever used Siri, Alexa, your GPS in your car, right? You're using speech recognition and natural language processing. And all these systems do is they take the words we speak, they transpose them into text. They generally go to the internet or a database. They find the best answer for you, like, where's a restaurant that's close to me? We've all used our systems for that. It'll come up with an answer for you. So there's some people who are very, very smart who have taken this type of technology and they formed it around an AI QA speech model so that we can apply this in the contact center world. So it's really important. It does some neat stuff. It will automatically assess calls. So right now, again, in our current world, we have QA analysts and they spend a heck of a lot of time listening to calls, taking notes, and trying to, sort of figure out how to score certain calls when they come in. What these systems do is they do all of this automatically. They'll measure things like sentiment, emotion, dead air and hold times, for example. So if you run an analysis on 100% of your calls, you might realize that 20% of your time in a specific call type, you have a lot of dead air. So you might have agents either that are A, not trained properly to accommodate the type of questions that you're getting, or B, you haven't really given them access to the right information quickly. And those things can be costly, especially if you got a couple of hundred agents. If you think about being able to reduce dead air time by 15 or 20%, and the cost savings could be pretty significant, right? So this is essentially, though, what AI speech analytics is all about. So how does it really work? Here's, I guess, a fairly simple diagram that we've put together to help you appreciate this. There's really 3 pieces to this. One is there's a transcription part of the process, there's deep learning, and then there's the results that you get from it. Again, you're looking at, measuring 98% more than most people measure today, so 100% of all calls. Natural language processing, we already sort of touched on that, is the process of understanding what someone says in a call, transposing that speech into text. Perfect. Now, the reality is the maturity state of today's technology gets us to about an 80% accuracy rate. So what tends to happen is, if you're driving in a car, if you might not have a great connection on a line, it might be difficult for a system to completely pick up exactly what you're saying and transpose that, the words you speak, into text is perfectly accurate. But that's okay, because these systems are capable of recognizing certain tolerance levels. There's also something called metadata that these models work with. So metadata, the definition is really just data that provides information about other data. Now, examples of that, again, in the contact center world would be line of business, the agent themselves, what agent was actually facilitating the call, What's the target average handle time versus the actual average time? What's talk, hold, and wrap supposed to be? Are there repeat calls coming in, right? So now you've got all your information. It's getting converted from speech to text. And now that information is now speaking to other elements that you've got in your own system. The second piece is deep learning. Now, there are keywords in here. These systems don't just run on their own. You don't turn them on. They don't understand anything. You've actually got to work with them to build in keywords. Now, one of them would be something like a mini Miranda statement, sort of something along the lines like, thank you for calling. I just want to make you aware that this call is going to be recorded for quality purposes. Are you okay with that? So when you put in a statement like that, the system's going to automatically, when it's reviewing those calls, look to see that those compliance statements are being read every single time. It'll measure that, and I'll show you an example in a minute of how that looks on an actual worksheet. Sentiments are interesting too. It has the capability of detecting, I'll say, sense stress modulation. If someone calls up and says, I am really upset with you guys, the technician didn't show up yesterday, it'll measure that. Or they say something like, you know what, you've done a great job. Thank you so much for helping me. It'll measure that as a positive sentiment, right? All things that QA analysts would do in the past or currently do while they are actually listening to these calls live. So very time consuming, measures silence, pause analysis, and a whole bunch of other call center metrics. So that's sort of just, touching the surface on deep learning. And then of course, as a result, you've got charts, graphs, and trend reports. You're able within these models, once you collect all this information, to click on an area where it'll actually, show you visually that you might have a problem. You might have a problem with long hold time. You might have a problem with some really angry people calling in, and it'll help identify that visually. So now your QA's job's changed. They're not just listening to the call and grading an agent. They're now looking for business trends, right? That can help lead to coaching, training, or discussions with product teams and with marketing teams. So that's just, again, it's not a product demo. This is just touching the surface on how these systems work. Here's what a screen looks like. Actually, if I back up a little bit, think of what a current QA would see if you're looking at a call. You're generally just looking at a WAV file. You see this long squiggly line, might be a call that's 6 minutes and 8 seconds long. That's all you're going to see. You're going to see some hold times and some pauses in there, but you really have to listen to that call. The average 6-minute call takes about 10 to 12 minutes to properly assess. Most QAs have to go back and listen a few times as they're grading these calls. They got their scorecards, all these things. This is a screen sample of a call that was graded by a system. So what this does is it gives the QA the ability to say, there's a negative sentiment here. What did they say? They said, hi, I was calling because I didn't receive my order, my package. Well, that, for example, is an example of, let's say, 80% transposition accuracy, right? That's about it. The system still understands this is a negative sentiment. It didn't quite transpose, the words absolutely verbatim, most likely, but it still picked it up as a negative sentiment. The QA can go in there and see there's a negative sentiment here. Let me tune into this. Let me tune into dead air and see what's going on. Or, how's the agent actually read the mini Miranda statement? In this case, this is a debt collection call, right? And the required mini Miranda statement or compliance statement in here is, I am a debt collector attempting to collect the debt, and any information obtained will be used for that purpose. Those are statements that need to be read verbatim. So these systems work really well in highly regulated environments, and it graded them as satisfactory. And these scorecards go deep and wide, and you can do all kinds of things with them. I just thought, it made sense to show you what this looks like from a QA perspective. This is a really, I think, very interesting illustration, right? The iceberg effect. So again, if you're grading 1% to 2% of your business interactions by phone today, that's what it looks like. It really is the very tip of the iceberg. Forget about the piece above the water. It's the piece above the piece above the water. It's 2% at best. Now, with the AI side, you're looking at every part, every call, every element. And the reality is, if you look at the chart on the right, it'll pick up sense stress, it'll pick up modulation, it'll pick up when a client's agitated, it'll pick up when they're satisfied and they're happy. Did the agent, for example, read an empathy statement? If someone calls up and they're really unhappy with the service that they've received, did the agent deliver the right type of empathy statement? In the case of a competitor, it's really good at picking up things like, you know what, thanks very much. However, I'm buying it from, another supplier because it's 25% cheaper. it'll pick up those things. And within the system, within a day or two, you'll see a trend. This allows businesses to react quicker, to make adjustments and stay more competitive in the context of that example, right? So I just thought that would be an interesting slide to share too. So again, here's your traditional QA modeling, 1 to 2% of all interactions. This poor QA down here is doing a lot of things. They're downloading the call, they're listening to it, they're scoring it, they're having their calibrations with management teams, they're doing their one-on-one coaching or team coaching, and it all ends there. So this is a lot of work for 1 to 2% of the interactions. Quite frankly, 1 to 2% is really not that statistically valid. And the other piece is you got 98% of your team's work that's not being used to assess them. And if you look at this person down here again, the amount of work they do is confusing. You know, I was telling Liz as we were preparing for this, I used to run a call center in the late 90s in a mutual fund company. And when I started there, it's probably about 300-400 agents, and there were 20 QA analysts. I sat down with them all and I asked them one question. I said, if you can change anything about your job, what would it be? Almost all of them said the same thing. We feel like the call police and we're just providing negative feedback to the agents because we're so busy. It's the only thing we have time to focus on, right? So it's not necessarily the nicest job in the world to have. The other problem is it's very agent focused. It doesn't really provide meaningful business insight that's going to drive that change to your business. How can you with 1 to 2%? So now you look at the difference in the AI QA modeling. Now you got 100% of all your calls that are being assessed. The system is transcribing all the calls. You're picking up things like compliance issues, hold times. Are you aligned with all your KPIs? Now your QA and your coaching teams are having very meaningful discussions with agents. You know, the other piece, you know, with an agent that's sad is, what if you got that one bad call and QA happened to pick it up? I've seen people get terminated for things like that, and it was unfair. And it could have been a bad call, but you know, 99% of the time they did a great job, right? So it just gives you a much fairer way of dealing with people. But the biggest change comes in process or business redesign. It really allows you to get a deep understanding of your business and work with internal teams to redesign pieces of that business to improve, you know, your financial status, to improve the interaction that you're having with your customers, and quite frankly, team morale overall. So that's just a quick view of the difference between the two models. So now I'm going to hand it over to Liz, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of the customer experiences that that others have had with these types of products.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. So first up, we're going to share with you an organization in the insurance industry, Roots Insurance. And as we all know, adherence to compliance is really critical in the insurance industry. So just give us a sec here, and we're going to go through YouTube and pull up the video. Perfect. So if you could hold your thoughts as we share with you another organization, EmployBridge, who are in the recruitment industry, and then we'll debrief on some insights gained from both of these companies. Okay, perfect. So to highlight some learnings here, you know, first of all, clearly it made a difference to both of their organizations. But to sum it really all up, we heard that once a critical insight is identified with speech analytics AI, supervisors and managers quickly address it through targeted training programs tailored right down to the individual agent. So overall, the model has become an important part of their business from the top down. So if we move on here, what to expect once speech analytics AI has been implemented? In other words, how does it positively impact the contact center? So I took some time and interviewed quality analysts, operational leaders, and trainers, and I received the following feedback that we'd like to share with you today. So let's start with some of the feedback from the QA team. In their words, before voice AI, it was like being a hamster. We're like spinning our wheels and really getting nowhere. We're really only scratching the surface. However, after voice AI, our jobs have fundamentally shifted, and we're now contributing more to helping agents improve faster and also sharing insights into customer data that we never had access to before. From leaders and trainers in operations, in their words, before voice AI, QA process was broken. And in our internal calibration sessions, all we did was debate the calls and the scores, because it was just all very subjective in terms of the evaluations. However, now after voice AI, calibrations internally is now more collaborating and being able to implement training solutions that are relevant. They even provided an example of, many times they're in calibration sessions, they have a top agent, they had a bit of a bad news for an hour, they got flustered. However, one call was pulled on that hour, and that's how they were graded, and that's how they were looked upon. So I think it makes a big difference when you get the whole insight of 100% of all the calls being analyzed, and you get some perspective there. So moving on, what are some best practices? So we took some time and we interviewed, myself and Mark, some top contact center leaders and asked them, in their words, what are the 3 best practices when deploying speech analytics AI? So number 1 was to be patient and start small. You don't want to approach this as a one-all be-all solution. You can't go out and try and boil the ocean. And by starting small, you won't lose sight of the quick wins. Second one, number 2, focus on opportunities with a quick turnaround time for ROI. So look for the low-hanging fruit opportunities that gain buy-in, get quick ROI, and then you're going to build confidence throughout the organization. And number 3, act with urgency to create training and coach agents. Once a critical outlier is identified, you need to quickly address it through targeted training and tailored down to the individual agent. So now I'm going to hand it back to Mark on what to look for in a partner selection.
Great, thanks, Liz. Yeah, this is an important piece too. Now think about it for a minute. You've got this industry that's going to go from $1 billion industry to a $5 billion industry. There's a dozen or so partners that we've qualified. I'm sure there are more right now out there, but there's no doubt going to be many, many more that are hitting the market. So here's kind of the top 4 things that we thought were really important to look for. One of them is pretty obvious. It's transcription accuracy. Right? So, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, right? The benchmark is really that 80% benchmark, because it seems to be the place where even though the system's not transcribing at 100% accuracy rate, it still understands when to point a QA analyst to the right piece of a call. So it's important to have that. The current supplier we work with is, I think, somewhere around 87% accuracy, but 80% seems to be sort of that minimum waterline that you want to be looking for. And we also have no doubt that over time, these numbers are going to improve, right? Ease of implementation and support. So do you require a lot of development? Do you really need to include your IT teams to integrate this? Does it include an onboarding and facilitated training, right? Does the supplier you're working with include that? And this isn't just for the QAs, but this is also for executive teams and managers and people who really want to get a deeper understanding of that actual data that you're looking at. Do you have a dedicated compliance, a success team that goes way beyond the technical implementation? So, you sort of hit a threshold at 5 or 6 months, say, great, I'm getting a better understanding. What can I do more now with this tool? You're listening, you're able to grade 100% of all the interactions you have. And it's unprecedented in the call center industry, unless you have limitless budgets, and I'm sure none of us do, right? It's really been hard to do that, but now you can. So the question is, can that supplier help you get better with that information that you're collecting? Ease of use. The one thing you don't want to be is being proud of, being able to program in DOS or being Neo from the Matrix, and you can interpret all these strange numbers on a screen. The systems that we've seen are all relatively intuitive. They're point, they're click. Anybody can use them, right? That's what you really need to look for. If it's too complicated, you might want to look at a different solution. And then the fourth one is, probably arguably one of the most important ones, is the platform secure. Most of us work in PCI compliant environments. Some of us work in SOC 2 environments. Is the data being protected in the partner that you're dealing with? This is a really important one too. The second one is about, are you transcribing card data into a whole bunch of text? Hopefully not, right? So you have to have really strong redaction modeling built in. Could you imagine having 100,000 credit cards a year shared over the phone, transcribed into some document floating around? It'd be completely unacceptable, right? So it's important to ask that question, but also to kick the tires and test the supplier. Make sure that they know exactly what your expectations are and that there's zero room for any redaction errors. And then, of course, how's the data stored and transferred? Is it encrypted if you're sharing information back and forth? So those are just there's some pretty important things that you need to look for. Yeah, so the question is why change, right? And we thought, this was a pretty good illustration of the old way and the new way, and where some of these organizations have gone. If you think of Blockbuster for a minute, the legend or the rumor is that the former CEO of Blockbuster was offered to buy Netflix for $50 million and basically laughed and scoffed and said, "Where's this thing going to go?" Right? So I checked today, and I think Netflix is worth just south of about $200 billion as a company. That's how much they've generated, right? So that was a pretty big mistake. And when you think of Amazon, I'll give you another example. I helped my daughter with her homework the other day, and I generally don't get more than a 70 when I do it. She doesn't like it, but I decided, I wanted to help her anyways. And she had to pick an example of a business leader that she wanted to talk about and sort of do a presentation on it. She didn't pick me, she didn't pick Liz, but she picked Jeff Bezos for some reason. Who knows why? Anyways, it's really interesting. As I was learning more about Jeff Bezos, going to Wikipedia and everything, you realize that this guy was absolutely incredible at pulling data from every single part of his organization. He understood how productive every single employee was, what process worked and what didn't. He did it all in real time. So he built a pretty incredible business, and one that gets me in trouble at least 2 or 3 times a week when things get dropped off at my house, right? So, again, example of why change and why, having a lot more insight into your business can help you completely redesign what you're working on, because the future's coming whether you decide to adopt these things or not. Liz, do you have anything to add on this?
Yes,
I
hi.
think you're on mute, my friend.
Yes, I'm now unmuted. Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. First of all, with most people having to migrate to the work from home model recently, you may lose visibility and insights. No longer can your team leaders walk over and plug in and speak to agents, especially newcomers. However, with speech AI, we've seen some real benefits having deployed it prior to the work from home model being deployed out. And the last thought that I'd like to leave you with is, again, understanding your customer conversations, every single one taking place daily, is what will drive the ultra efficient contact centers of the future. And one last thought, I have Blockbuster videos that I went to return many years ago. Sorry. And I went there and they were closed, and I didn't know whether to be happy because I don't have a bill anymore because they were very late, or sad. I don't know what I was going to do. But interestingly enough, the world changed. So again, thank you very much today for everybody's time, and we really appreciate it. So we'll hand it back to the moderator here.
Well, thank you very much, Mark and Elizabeth. It constantly amazes me how complex our whole industry is, and that you've taken us through a great educational experience on the topic of artificial intelligence and speech analytics. Obviously, a growing area. We heard you speak about the background of AI and analytics and how it works. We heard about transcription and deep learning and results. We heard about using an electronic ear basically to listen to 100% of the transactions as opposed to that traditional 1 to 2% that might get taken up. I really loved your iceberg visual. It's not even going below the water. It's just the tip of the tip that we're measuring today for the most part. Yep. And I also like moving beyond the call police. That's a really good observation, and moving into more, okay, what are you going to do about it? Some great testimonials. We heard about best practices, being patient and starting small, focusing on the low-hanging fruit. We heard about acting with urgency, and we also heard about partner selection in terms of transcription accuracy. the ease of implementation support, ease of use and security and redaction. So that was very, very helpful. So just a reminder to our viewers, if you've got a question for our experts on AI and speech analytics, please just simply tap it into your webinar tool, and we'll get to that. And as you're doing that, we do have some other questions that have come in. So to Mark and Elizabeth, first question is, so just so we're clear, is this a cloud-based service, or is it a capital thing that we bolt into our existing call center environment? So
it's a cloud-based service. It is absolutely a cloud-based service, yes.
Great. And next question was, and how does the pricing model work on this? Is it on a per agent, or?
I can take that.
Yeah,
so the pricing model varies. It's definitely per agent per month, so subscription based model. The suppliers that we've dealt with didn't charge us any implementation fees, but that usually comes along with having a minimum amount of volume that you're going to provide to them. So the pricing can be anywhere from about $25 US per month per agent, all the way up to about $100. Right, and a lot of it too depends on how much you want to, how much volume of calls you want to assess. Like 100% is what you can do. You can also do 50%. So it all comes down to server space and the effort that they put in. But the range is generally $25 to $100 a month, based on volume and based on your seat count that you have. And yeah, that's kind of how the models work.
Okay, great. And the next one was, and so what exactly is the implementation process to put this in place?
So you want to get that, Liz? Or yeah, I'll speak to that. It's okay. Yeah, the implementation process is, first you got to get educated, and what the supplier we worked with did was they sat down with us, they sat down with our operations team and our QAs, and they went through sort of a similar type of overview of what does this product do to start with, and how is this going to change the way that you work going forward. And then it comes down to looking at your scripts and doing assessments on what are the most important elements in your calls that you need to measure. So you essentially take your traditional scorecard and all the elements you have in there, and you start baking in those statements into the system. And the reality is, you'll start off slow and you'll be up and wobbly, but over a number of weeks as you progress, you'll get all the right statements in place, and then you'll start seeing the right outputs from the system, and you'll start understanding the reporting a little bit better. So the whole process end to end is anywhere from about 3 to 6 weeks, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry, Elizabeth.
I was going to just add that, our operational team had suggested that there's, lots of additions going on day over day over day when you first start the process. So you really need to also look for a partner that's going to have a dedicated person, an account manager that works directly with your team, because that makes a big difference as well.
Okay, great. Next one up, obviously change management opportunities. If are you concerned with agents feel like every single thing I'm doing is being listened to every single second? And I know that we get into call recording and whatnot, but this takes it to the next level in terms of people are analyzing everything I'm doing. So are you seeing any pushback from the agents as being a challenge to getting the service implemented?
That's a great question, because we had concerns about that as well. And what we're seeing is the opposite, because we're really pushing a lot of the positivities now that we've never seen, because on QA it was all about the negative scenes. So I think that's a really good question, and think about how much positivity you're missing out on and being able to.
If I can add to that answer too. So, one of the things that we've told employees is you're currently getting graded on 1 to 2% of all your work. Would you like to be graded on all of it, right? And almost all of them said, you know what, good point. I do a really good job every day. And the bottom line is, in the call center world, it's the most data rich, I guess, profession I can think of where you can monitor everybody every minute of the day anyway. So I think most agents are already accustomed to that, or they assume it might be happening. So now to be graded properly based on 100% of the assessments is actually been welcome once you explain it to them that way.
Yeah, not be caught by that one bad thing that happened that really toasts them. I say.
Yeah, we've all seen that. We've seen people, all of us, get terminated. They do have a bad call, and sometimes it sounds bad, but they might have had a bad day too. Some things are unacceptable. We get that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you're really great 99.9% of the time, let's maybe give you another chance.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Next one is, how does the implementation of this type of technology impact the quality assurance team? Elizabeth, would you have a comment on that?
Sure, yes, I do. So it can impact them in terms of the fundamental shift in their job. That's what we've seen. They're no longer frustrated spending 1 to 2%, grading calls. They're actually now looking in a deeper dive, and they're actually being trained to do that as well, because it takes, a real analyst understanding. What are you looking for? How are you going to present that back to the operations that then present it back to the client? But there can be a reduction as well in the QA team. It can run from a 20 to 40% reduction. We have seen that as well.
Great, thank you. Next one in, does the technology work on recorded calls, or is it working on live calls?
So the technology we currently use works on recorded calls, and there's about a 6-hour delay. There are other technologies and emerging technologies that can work on live calls. I can't speak to how well they work. We haven't used them yet, but I have no doubt that they probably work quite well.
Great, thank you very much. Next one that's come in is, and I think you've touched on this already, Mark, but just what is the estimated cost to run speech AI?
Yeah, again, let's quantify this for a minute. If you've got about 200 agents, you're going to pay about $35 a month US per agent. That's to run 100% of the calls. So you can be in for, $25 a month if you want to run some around 70, 80% of the calls, which is actually a really amazing sample size. So that's how you have to calculate it. It's per agent per month cost.
Okay, so ergo, if you only wanted to measure, like going backwards from a cost point of view, if you want to measure 25% of your agents, is it sort of 25% of the cost?
Not quite. It's not quite that type of scale.
Okay.
It's close to that. It does get reduced, but there's still a base cost that you're going to get charged, because again, you still got access to all the support people. You've got the technology that's running, right?
Right.
Just to quantify this for a minute, if I can. So if you have 200 agents, and make my math easy, and you're paying, $30 a month per agent, right? You'd be looking at, what's that? Somewhere around $75,000 a year. I guess that's my napkin math. I'm not sure if I got it right, but that's about a cost of about a QA and a half, if you think of it that way. But I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So you've got one FT. If you had one FT in that environment doing the QA on 1 to 2% of the calls, you could replace that FTE with managing 100% of the calls and getting much better feedback.
Correct. Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Also love the fact that the technology picks up the sentiments. There's so much. There's the soft stuff that this stuff picks up. That's really amazing.
It is.
Right? Just another question is, and again, I think you've touched on it briefly, just a question regarding the estimated timeline for implementation. So somebody says, hey, I'm sort of interested. How long to go from that? And assuming no obstacles, but sort of, how long does it take to get this thing in place?
Between 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow, that's very fast. Next question that's come in. Can you switch people in the seats?
I don't.
In other words, is the pricing per individual or by seat? And can you switch people in the seats?
So the pricing we have is by individual. I haven't asked that question yet, though. It's generally, at the beginning of the month, here's a list of agents that you're going to be assessing for the month. Here's how much we're paying per agent, right? So if someone leaves mid-month, we haven't really approached that with the supplier yet. By the way, we don't sell this product, just for the record. We're not salespeople for them. We just thought it was really groundbreaking, because call centers haven't changed very frequently, right? So I don't know the answer to that question. We can certainly find out if you'd like.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. And just a reminder, if you have a question as one of our viewers, happy to bring it in. We've already covered quite a few, and as we'll just monitor that for the next few moments. I'm not seeing anything coming in right now. So with that, maybe we'll bring this webinar to a close. Would certainly like to thank Elizabeth and Mark for their time with us. So we'll allow you to step down off of the screen right now, and I'll just continue on with the close. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you for your time and the opportunity. We appreciate it. Take care, folks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So for our viewers, our next corporate partner conversation series webinars will be held on November the 3rd. And this topic will be presented by Omicron, who will be presenting digital substations in the IEC 61850 registration. This session will specifically be of interest to your engineering and operations staff, so just notify them about this. Then on November the 5th, we've got RS Technologies who will be presenting understanding wood pole performance and equivalent composite pole selection. And this session will be of interest certainly to your asset management team members, so let them know. All of CEA's future events and webinars can be found in our monthly newsletter, Current Affairs, and you also can go to the news and events section of our website at electricity.ca. So thank you again for joining us today, and until next time, bye for now.